but there was little knowledge or experience with throttleable rocket engines. Much more thrust than that for landing was needed to provide a sufficient level of deceleration for an efficient trajectory from orbit down to hover over the lunar surface. For the engineers among you, we tried two technical approaches to this widely variable throttling engine. One was involved in injecting gas into the propellant flows to reduce the thrust, and the second was to use cavitating venturis. Both techniques worked, but the cavitating venturis were selected for the actual flight engines, which worked amazingly well. It was engineering at its very best in the space age. The theme of this Science and Technology Summit is Meet the Future, and it's most appropriate. We live at an axis, midway between the macro of the galaxies and the micro of the atom, somewhere between the birth and death of the sun, midway between our past and our future. And the future is the most challenging, the most enigmatic, the most fascinating. In 1939, a World's Fair was held in New York City. Many countries from around the world participated in the exposition with the theme, The World of Tomorrow. There was intense interest. 25 million people attended. It was so successful that the fair was extended for an additional year, and in 1940, 20 million more people passed through the gates, and there were displays of the newest inventions. Everyone wanted to glimpse the future, to see what inventions and developments would revolutionize their lives, as predicted by the world's leading scientists and futurists. But nowhere in this remarkable exposition did any exhibit predict atomic energy. Nowhere was there suggestion of the jet engine, and no mention could be found of that transistor, microcircuitry. Yet all three, each of which had enormous impact on the world of tomorrow, became reality within the next decade. Scientists have often been embarrassed by their predictions. Lord Kelvin, distinguished scientist and president of the Royal Society, famously proclaimed in 1895 that, quote, heavier than air, flying machines are impossible. 8 years later, the Wright brothers made their successful flights, and 6 years after that, international air meets with many flyers demonstrating their progress were held. Engineers were equally inept in predicting the future. After the launch of the first man-made satellite, Sputnik, in 1957, the famous engineer and designer Dr. Lee De Forest, often called the father of electronics, proclaimed, and I quote, "This year may become known as the first year of the man-made planet, the tiny artificial Earth satellite. But to place a man in a multi-stage rocket and project him into the controlling gravitational field of the moon, where the passenger can make scientific observations, perhaps land alive, and then return to Earth, all that constitutes a wild dream worthy of Jules Verne. I am bold enough to say that such a man-made moon voyage will never occur, regardless of all scientific advances." During the course of the last century, we witnessed the invention of the airplane, the splitting of the atom, the introduction of television, the near elimination of a number of diseases, the development of electronics, electronic computer, the unraveling of DNA, the beginnings of genetic engineering, the creation of the internet, and the exploration of space. The remarkable aspect of all these developments is that, in general, they were not predicted. Further, for the most part, they were not created in response to customer demand. The customer rarely comes up with a genuinely good idea. What does produce the really great idea? Well, on rare occasions, it might be that eureka moment, but in the main, it is human curiosity, a creative mind, limitless resolve, and endless trial and error. So how can we best meet the future? When I was a student, I had aspirations to be an airplane designer. I carefully selected all my subjects in school to maximize my choices of reaching maximize my chances of reaching that goal. When at age 24 I discovered the world of aircraft flight testing, I changed my goal. Fortunately, most all of the things I had studied for design were applicable to flight testing. When I actually reached my goal and actually found work in my chosen field, my official job title was Aeronautical Research Scientist. And indeed, the work I was doing was science, expanding the boundaries of knowledge in aeronautical research. I'd become a member of the American Rocket Society at age 18, and by age 27, I was actually flying rocket-powered research aircraft. Even so, I did not believe that spaceflight would become a reality in my lifetime. The knowledge and technology required seemed to be impossibly difficult. And although I personally was unable to predict the future, I had somehow been able to prepare for it. The 21st century will likely produce large increases in scientific knowledge and numbers of new inventions, and developments probably will be similar to those of the 20th century. But today, we don't know what those breakthroughs will be. And as they occur, engineers will create new devices that will change human lives in many ways. It will be exciting. The author, H.G. Wells, wrote about humans flying to the moon in his 1901 novel, First Men in the Moon. In 1932, our now most favorite rocket inventor, Robert Goddard, wrote a letter to Mr. Wells, in which he wrote, and I quote, "There can be no thought of finishing, for aiming at the stars, both literally and figuratively, is a problem to occupy generations. And so that no matter how much progress is made, there will always be the thrill of just beginning." There is a thrill in beginning. There's also a certain satisfaction in ending, which motivates me to say thank you and good luck in science and technology.
Thank you so much, Gustav. It's an honor.